You should tell us.
Then Dr. Ngoko can start.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mtwaba. Thank you.
I'll play let's play the jingle. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Our mission is to develop, engage, and empower current and future generations of women leaders.
My son one day, so mommy, what do you do at work? So I tried to explain software engineering, and that's when the spark came, and I said, okay, what if I venture into entrepreneurship where I build an academy in which I teach children how to write software and to make sure that the future generations are basically catered to.
I think when it comes to enabling conducive environment for the inclusion of women, technology is a powerful tool, but it's just one tool. And no one, women or anyone else, should forget their whole selves when they come to the table.
Good afternoon. I think that the process that we're going to follow is for me to greet everyone. Prof, officially welcome, Prof. Matthews. Welcome from New York. Dr. Ngoko, welcome from Nelson Mandela. I hope you're based in East London, or you're based in PE. I'm not sure where you're connecting from, but welcome from where you're connecting from. Prof. Shava, welcome from Namibia. Your host today is Sonwabo Mdwaba. I am the founder and the president of PITA. For just as a background, PITA was formed in 2020 during COVID lockdown. It just crossed my mind when I was sitting and I was trying to think, what do I do with my 3 months sitting at home? What difference do I want to make to communities where we're coming from and communities that are part of the continent? And the PITA idea was born. So presently, as a quick background, PITA is operating, we've got partnership in over 7 countries in Africa. The furthest is Ethiopia. We've got a partnership with University of Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and we've got a board advisory person that is based in Ethiopia. And we've managed in the past 5 months to partner with an organization based in the EU. As a result of that partnership, which is we formed a radio station. We've got an internet radio station that is up and running to connect the different countries or the rest of the world. We've got a show that we run with the EU Tech House, and that organization based in the EU. On agri-tech, basically they do agri-tech, giving information or disseminating information on agriculture and how to export into the EU. So that's what we do in a very short brief. I can talk the whole day about PITA. I think this platform is for us to address women and girls in science. How do they get empowered? These are sisters that are sitting and they need someone, or they need a voice that is going to an advocacy organization that hopefully is going to make a difference as we go into the future. But we can't make a difference on our own, which is why I've invited everyone that is here to give input, and hopefully I can tap into your knowledge into the future. Without us working together, we will not achieve the PITA mandate or vision. So that's why we're here. And I normally try and tap into different people or different professionals in different areas of the continent or the world. I think as an introduction, gender equality in science is pivotal to the achievement of international development goals, including the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development. Over the past decades, the global community has made strides in inspiring and engaging women and girls in science. However, women and girls continue to be excluded from the participating fully in science. We all know in different countries, especially in our continent, and I know in South Africa as well, that we're battling to get girls to do science or STEM-related courses. How do we change that position that we find ourselves? Because as we go into the future, women, you over 50%. Depending on the country, some countries is 55, some countries is 60. How do we make a difference and pull you into the mainstream and make a difference in our existing economy? A significant gender gap has persisted through the years at all levels of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics disciplines all over the world. Even though women have made tremendous progress towards increasing their participation in higher education, they are still underrepresented in these fields. We must begin to recognize the role of women and girls in science, not only as beneficiaries, but also as agents of change. In order to accelerate basically progress towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, these are some of the facts that we have. Women presently, or when I did research, are typically given smaller research grants than their male colleagues, and this you can confirm when we're talking, while they represent 33.3% of all researchers. Only 12% of members of national science and academies are women. In cutting-edge fields such as artificial intelligence, which is critical for the future, only 1 in 5 professionals, 22% in terms of numbers, is a woman. Despite the shortage of skills in most of the technological fields driving the 4IR or Fourth Industrial Revolution, women still account only 28% of engineering graduates and 40% of graduates in computer science and informatics. And it varies between different countries. I know where Prof. Matthews is sitting in New York, women participation in tech space is about 42%. In some countries, it's as low as 18%, 19% respectively. South Africa, I think we're sitting at about 23, 25%. Female researchers tend to have shorter and less well-paid careers. And this, through our research, there's even a drive to get women into certain positions. They've dropped the skills requirement, which gives a bad picture in that women look like they're underskilled, whereas some of lots of women that I know and that are in the society are more skilled than men. There are assumptions in terms of when you go through research documents or papers that have been written. There's 3 barriers that we've picked up, and these are things that we're going to discuss. They say women are not doing well in science because of family responsibilities, societal patriarchal attitudes, and non-conducive work environments and remuneration. I think on that note, I'm going to hand over to you, Dr. Ngoko, so that you can introduce yourself. And I think my proposal is let us introduce ourselves before we continue with the discussion, so that people know who they are sitting with. I've decided not to have a summary of your bios. If you can just give a 2-minute background on yourself, then we continue. I think it's going to be much easier. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mtawa. Perhaps I can start with the introductions. So, as you've mentioned, my name is Bukelwa Ngoko, currently a senior lecturer at Nelson Mandela University here in Gqeberha. My areas of research interest and my work life is spent mainly looking at the issues of IT governance, and within IT governance, security, and within security, the behavior people exhibit when they interact with technology. So that's my small background.
Thank you. Prof. Matthews?
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here. I am Gina Matthews. I'm a professor of computer science at Clarkson University, which is in way upstate New York, right on the Canadian border, very far from New York City. And my research interests focus on the rights of individuals in a world of automation, wanting automated systems to contribute to healthy humans, healthy communities, healthy societies, and the barriers to that we see all around us.
Thank you, Prof. Prof. Shava?
Good afternoon. My name is Fungai Bunushava. I'm an associate professor in cybersecurity at the Namibia University of Science and Technology in Namibia. I am the acting executive dean for the Faculty of Computing and Informatics. My research passions are in cybersecurity in underserved communities, and I also am passionate about human-computer interaction. And one of the areas that I love focusing on is inclusivity and equitable access to technologies. And as such, I also actively research in gender issues, in child online protection, and any ways of making the society a better place for all those who are using technologies. Thank you.
Thank you. I think welcome all. I think at this point, Dr. Ngoko can continue with her presentation, and we can take the show forward.
Thank you. I hope everyone can see my PowerPoint.
Yes, thank you, Doctor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mtoba. I just want to, before I forget, I want to start by thanking PICTA for creating this platform, because I think before I even hear what Professor Matthews and Prof. Shava will present, I'm already inspired, because the work they're doing is has a specific focus that I haven't gone down, in exploring in mine. So by us connecting as women, there's already, things that we can learn from. So keep doing what you're doing. You're definitely going in the right direction.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I've prepared a very brief presentation for today's session, because as I mentioned earlier, I spend most of my time teaching or researching about IT governance and cybersecurity. So when I got the invite, I thought, hey, Mr. Mtoba, maybe uitumele kumdo wrong, because this is not the direction of my I cautioned myself, how can it be, misdirected? Because I am a woman and I am operating in the IT space. So I definitely have a contribution, and my voice can actually add to this conversation. So over the next few slides, I will take you through some of my own deliberations and thoughts as I try to unpack the topic that was given for us today. Please keep an open mind, because I have a very interesting proposition right at the end. So over the next few slides, I'll talk about the issue of empowerment. We'll look at some facts that, I found interesting relating to ICT, women in ICT. Also look at equity, and I'll leave you with just one disruptive thought right at the end. So empowerment, looks like my presentation lost a bit of formatting on importing, but it doesn't matter. The content is still there. So empowerment, I went on because my brain, Professor Shava and Professor Matthews, is a Xhosa wired brain. It thinks and processes first in Xhosa, then it has to translate into English and any other language that I might need to. So when I looked at empowerment, because I had to look at this seriously now, Mr. Mtoba, has given us quite a heavy topic. So you don't want to lay empowerment. So Google is my friend, and I found an online dictionary which defined empowerment as an authority or power given to someone to do something. Authority or power given to somebody to do something. Empowerment. Okay, so I'm still smiling at this point. Then I read up a bit more, and I realized that other women for years have been talking about this issue of women's empowerment and gender equality. Of particular interest, I found a quote from Ms. Ramusepele, who was then a director at the Department of International Relations, in a speech that she made to the UN. She said, "Without women's empowerment and gender equality, societies will not be able to achieve the Millennium Development Goals and their full development potential." So already in 2011, women were already thinking and they were concerned about this very issue that we're talking about today. Then I continued to read, and I came across information that was provided by Ms. White on an article she wrote where she said women make up 47% of all employed adults in the US. But in 2015, I think Professor Matthews might have more recent numbers for us in her presentation. In 2015, they only held 25% of computing roles. So this was in the US in 2015. Again, as I continue to read, there was a report that also indicated the same, that women in Australia now, around the same time, in 2013, there were only 20% of the ICT workforce in then. So it was in US and it was in Australia, only to discover that even in 2016 in South Africa, the problem was still the same, with the then Deputy Minister of Communications stating that women in South Africa only made up 20% of the ICT sector in 2016. So this is not new. This is not new. I then wondered what could actually be contributing to this problem that doesn't seem like it wants to go away. And I came across another bit of interesting statistic now from the global report from the World Economic Forum, which stated that only 12.94% of South African graduates. Now this hit closer to home because, like I mentioned earlier, I'm a lecturer at a university. Only 12.94% of graduates in STEM, which is your science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, are actually women. So it looks like we lose some of these young women. I wish I had a comparative bit of information which told me how many actually started the journey so that we can compare with the exit, but only 12.94% actually graduates with STEM qualifications. Okay, then we look at some more numbers. Silicon Valley, heart of tech, all things tech. This is what they were reporting in 2016. Yes, so with some of the big companies in Silicon Valley, you can see that female representation in tech jobs actually range from 10%, maximum 20%. This is in 2016. Fast forward a couple of years later, still looking at Silicon Valley, there are some companies that they surveyed which still remained the same. There was some kind of improvement. I think if I go back and I check Apple was at 20% in 2016. Apple grew to 24% women representation a few years later. Facebook also grew to 24%, coming from 15% a couple of years earlier. And I think we also could look at Google, which went from 17% to 25% a couple of years later. So there is some improvement. Coming closer to home, there's a report that again was presented to the World Economic Forum that actually looked at some of the 4IR related careers, skills of the future, we call them in 4IR circles. These are, careers that are driven in response to the wave of 4IR that we're all talking about. So if you look at the numbers in terms of female representation, or the split between men and females in the different careers that are linked to 4IR, if you look at your cloud computing, women are at only 14%, engineering 14%, data and AI at 28%. So the problem found its way all the way from 2011 to 2020 in present day South Africa, where we're still not getting the numbers right. Okay, so I paused for a minute and I asked myself, from the previous slides, this is what I'm taking away. The challenge of gender representation is not unique to South Africa. So it's not a South African problem, it's all over the world. And I also noted that we lose the attention of young women by the time they graduate. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I wish I had a comparative figure that could actually state how many were enrolled versus how many graduate in the end. But based on the numbers that I'm currently teaching in class, I'm worried about that 12.94%, because in classrooms in South Africa right now, there's more than 50% representation in my classes alone. So the skills of the future also seem to be repeating the same cycle in terms of gender inequality. So as the new skills develop, you would think these are millennial babies. They were all born around the same time with better access to a whole lot of resources. So they would be on par in terms of progress and access to opportunities, the guys and the girls, the females and the males. Now, while signs of change are there, the pace of transformation is slow. Then I went on to the second one, equity, right? Empowerment, we're good. Equity. My favorite online dictionary again says it's the quality of being fair and impartial. Now, my formatting kind of went, but I emphasized fairness and impartiality. Mr. Ndaba already started to mention some of the challenges. There's many, but I've only included in this slide those that kind of stood out for me to add to the list that will probably grow the more we continue to talk today. So another issue that is linked, well, one issue that's linked to gender inequality in the ICT arena I found was that there's underrepresentation and poor retention in computer courses. This tied into what we saw earlier when we lose graduates in STEM. There's also gender stereotypes and social beliefs about the abilities of women. There's subtle biases that favor men, as well as, especially in a place like South Africa, cultural biases and social expectations that actually hinder women going into these tech spaces. Now, I don't know, okay, Professor Matthews, you missed it, the State of the Nation address by President Ramaphosa last night. Professor Shava, you're also in Namibia, you also missed it. We had a State of the Nation address yesterday. And I was quite happy to hear President refer to measures that they will put in place to promote the empowerment of women. And I wanted to shout at the television, Mr. President, my concern is not really about empowerment. Can you please focus on the equity part? Because for me, if I have the same access to resources and the same access to opportunities as my male counterparts, and I receive the same recognition and the same value, I will be happy. So for me, my interpretation of equity then equated exactly what I've just said. Access to resources, equal access to resources and opportunities for equal access, so for equal recognition and equal value. So that's what I actually wanted to communicate to President Ramaphosa. Mr. Mdwaba, if you can please pass this along.
We will try to pass it along.
Thank you. Now, I asked myself, yes, there are problems. Yes, there are limitations. But what can I do from where I am in a classroom environment? And I came across a framework that is presented by a group called Reboot Representation, which focuses their energy on trying to ensure that there's representation across different sectors. And I thought this was interesting. From it, I'll take away some things that will actually, I can do tomorrow in my own classroom, okay? So the building blocks that they mention is offering diverse on-ramps for beginners. We'll unpack these in the next 2 slides. Creating a sense of belonging, building her confidence, cultivating a community of supportive peers, ensuring that there's adult gatekeepers, fostering an interest in computing careers, creating continuity between computing experiences, and providing access to technology and computing experiences. Now, as another disclaimer, these would be the ideal. Looking at the diversity within the South African classroom in terms of income earning, in terms of cultural and social backgrounds, these would have to actually be aligned to the context. So when it comes to offering diverse on-ramps, they look at creating different classes for true beginners. So if I'm from Mkanduli and I register at NMU and I'm sitting next to somebody who comes from Cambridge in East London, then our starting points hopefully must not be the same, because you must consider the context. So you also want to remove any assumption of existing knowledge from introductory courses. So we're all starting from the same starting point, and actively welcoming beginners into the program. Creating a sense of belonging was the second one. So you want to remove gender-specific materials in your content, highlight role models who break stereotypes, and provide access to role models from communities of color. I think in that case, it would have also gone across to the fact that if we're looking at representation in ICT sector, you go one level down and you're going to say, you know, cultural representation is also important, because there's minorities that are still not represented within that. So you also want to build the confidence of those young girls by creating opportunities to get them involved in research and you know, get them to contribute in that. You also want to nurture that by creating a community of supportive peers and connecting these young people as groups. So the last four, I won't go into in detail, which ensure that there's adult gatekeepers. And I worry again, if I'm from, you know, depends on my background, fostering an interest in computing careers. I think PICTA has a role to play in that as well. Providing access to technology and computing experiences are some of the practical tools that they highlight as part of their building blocks. I think as I come towards the end of my presentation, I want to, hopefully I would have retained the formatting. I want to leave you with one disruptive thought, which has lost formatting.
Okay.
But I'll walk you through the design of the disruptive thought, okay? So empowerment we defined earlier as an authority or power given to someone to do something. Who is this higher power that gives you this authority? Who is this authority? And that is given. I also underlined given. So that implies that I must get permission before I can do something. So my thought says the power to do or to move in careers that actually are in the sciences lies with me as the young woman or the woman. Perhaps the delay we saw as we looked at the various concerns raised by the women across the decades is because young women or women are waiting for the president to say, I will empower you. So the empowerment part for me is the wrong starting point, because for me, once young women understand that if I have access to the same opportunities and the same resources, I should be able to get the same value and the same recognition on the other side. Okay. So empowerment must start with self-empowerment. We have to give ourselves the authority to do whatever it is that we want to do within the ICT or the science space. Thank you very much. That's all I have for today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ngoko. Highly appreciate. Between Professor Shava and Professor Matthews, who is taking the discussion forward?
As you like.
Okay, take it, Prof. Matthews.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me here. It is a real pleasure to be here with all of you. I really enjoyed your presentation, Professor Ndwoko. Let me share mine here. Let's see. Are you seeing that okay?
I'm seeing it okay. Thank you very much.
Terrific. So for a little context, I thought I'd show you, this is a picture from last weekend here in New York with me and my students and their families. We went snowshoeing. So that's where I'm coming from. And I wish I was there with you in South Africa. A trip to South Africa was actually one of my last trips before COVID. I had the honor of being part of the 2019 Open Innovations Conference in Cape Town. But I wish I was there rather than in the snow, but here I am. I don't think I'm going to spend too much time talking about me. I'm a professor of computer science at Clarkson. I'm very active in ACM and IEEE. I'd rather spend a little more time talking about the topic of today. Professor Ngoku, I struggled a little bit with, I don't consider myself necessarily an expert in empowerment, but I want to talk about the role of tech in our empowering our future. So I hear a lot of tech leaders say, basically, this will be great. They say things like technology is on the cusp of taking us into a magical age, solving problems that we simply couldn't solve on our own. Machine learning will do everything from curing blindness to saving animals from extinction. Machine intelligence will lift us from toil and struggle into a new realm of leisure and fulfillment, a future society graced by abundance in all things, where employment is but a crazy distant memory. When I hear things like that, I think that they're not being honest with all of us. Technology is powerful, but technology that's powerful is powerful for good and bad. And when you say this will be great for everyone, you're sweeping a lot of details under the carpet. Oftentimes that this is going to be great for everyone comes along with, let us surveil your every action, give us your DNA, what could possibly go wrong? And there are no guarantees that the benefits of technology will automatically come to you, your family, your community. And in fact, there's lots of evidence they won't unless you fight for that and insist. And there's a lot of harms and trade-offs, not just pure benefits. New technologies mean a shifting power landscape with winners and losers, and we all need to insist on our place at the table. Professor Ngoku was talking about equity and fairness. And, one thing I've seen in looking at AI ethics is that there's no one definition of fairness. There's no one definition of ethics either. When you have individual rights, what's best for an individual, what's best for a group of people, what's good for the planet, what's good for all species, when those things come into conflict, there's no one definition of fairness. There is stakeholders fighting for their place at the table. And here's some references if people are interested in looking at more of those different definitions of fairness. But, one thing that people often talk about is the trolley problem. In the trolley problem, you have a trolley coming and you have to choose whether it's going to run over, you could pull a lever and have it diverted and run over one person rather than running over 5 people. But what if that one person was someone in your family that you love a lot? And there's a lot of questions here. When rights come into conflict, when what's best for individuals versus groups, and more than that, come into conflict, how are we going to resolve those conflicts? Who gets to decide? And I think this is very much related to the disruptive thought that Professor Ngoku left us with. Who gets to decide? Who gives empowerment? Who gets to understand how decisions are made? And who's even represented in the set of entities should be considered. Like here in this picture, maybe we're not even talking about the ant that's running across the track. We didn't even model that as important. And we need more women making the decision, pulling that lever, deciding whose interests matter. And we need more diversity overall in who is making decisions. I don't know if you've watched or followed the work of Joy Buolamwini. There's a short video. It's only like 3 minutes. It's almost like a poem, Ain't I a Woman, where she's really talking about how technology recognizes women, and especially women of color. If you haven't ever watched this video, it's a short video, watch it. It's very inspiring. And, I don't know if people have followed kind of the gender shades work on facial recognition and how facial recognition, the accuracy of facial recognition systems vary a lot by skin color and gender. In other words, we are building AI systems, we're building automated systems that are not good for everyone automatically. And as an example from my own work, we're looking in natural language processing about gender bias and underrepresentation in NLP. And it really, a lot of it comes down to who is NLP listening to? There's huge disparities in NLP support across languages. Over 7,000 languages spoken in the world, but only 300 even have a Wikipedia corpora. And if you look at the tools in NLP support, English is very well supported, Chinese not so bad. There's a cluster of languages not too bad, but many languages are not supported at all. And it is not at all that it tracks with the number of speakers. You can get, good support for languages where there are many fewer speakers, and poor support for languages where there are lots of speakers. And here in this chart, I just listed some NLP tools, BERT, Word2Vec, NLTK, and Wikipedia2Vec, just as a very small example. And, put check marks for languages that are supported by these systems and X's when they're not. So even at this level, you can see a lot of disparity between languages that have check marks across the board and languages that don't. And even when there's a check mark for support, that can hide a lot of substantial caveats. Just because something is technically supported, there can be a lot less testing and therefore a lot more errors for some languages than others. Or here, like many of these systems that I'm highlighting here are modeling human languages as word vector, individual words in a language as word vectors. Is that even the right approach for some languages? Some languages, there's a higher ambiguity at the individual word level. Like the language itself is perfectly good for communicating all the concepts you want. But if you break it down and you say individual little word pieces, sometimes those word pieces have many, many alternate meanings, and you need the full context to understand it. So even the idea of breaking down NLP into, word vector systems is based on languages where that makes sense, and not on all languages, or languages where there are many ways to write or represent the same word. So, this lack of representation in early stages of the NLP pipeline, for example, representation in Wikipedia, is just further magnified throughout the NLP toolchain. If you don't have a good corpora of a language, then you don't build tools to support that. And then you get these pre-trained models in some languages that just drive researchers and developers to more and more and more use those languages. And then also NLP systems in general learn huge amounts of historical bias from corpora of human text, including gender bias. And, this picture, we all use CAPTCHAs or things that prove we're human these days. And have you ever found yourself, trying to ask not what is the correct answer from a human perspective, but what the system wants you to say? I think we more and more have to stand up for making systems adapt to us, not us adapting to them, especially when you look at the huge amount of disparity across gender and language and many other aspects. And, the point I really would like to say today is you are needed. We are needed to represent yourself, your family, your country, your language, all the living beings in the earth that you care about. You have to show up and be a round peg in a square hole that insists that automated systems accommodate you and the things you care about. We were talking about cybersecurity. I also have a background in cybersecurity, and I often will ask my students, like, why are the cybersecurity questions all about the security concerns of big governments and corporations? I ask students to think about what actually makes you feel insecure. What are you worried about? And is technology doing anything to help you about the things you feel insecure about? If it's not, why not? We've almost defined many of the objectives of these systems not to be the objectives of healthy humans and healthy societies and healthy communities and a healthy earth. And we need to be the ones deciding how automated systems will be built to change that narrative. I have a few recommendations of books that if you haven't, and films that if you haven't read or seen, could be great to elaborate on some of these points. And we did a film series that featured coded bias and Picture a Scientist, was very relevant to the idea of empowering women in STEM. And there's a bunch of links to that with that video series that you could follow. And also love to encourage people who are listening to this and to participate in this AI for Girls workshop that's going to be coming up very soon. I'd love to talk with people about that more if you're interested. And if you're interested in being a researcher in this space, I have some resources here, a talk I give, Becoming a Researcher, and the FACT Network, the Fairness, Accountability, and Transparency Network, that does a lot of work in trying to make automated systems more accountable and transparent and fair and equitable. So I thank you very much for having me here today, and I look forward to participating in the rest of this wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Prof. Matthews. Let's continue to Professor Shava. Professor Shava.
Good afternoon. So let me take over from where Professor Matthews ended. I'm just putting up my slides, although I'm not going to follow them so much, considering that my predecessors have already spoken to the main aspects. However, I'll just bring to light some of the things that we can still do together. So allow me to start by sharing a story about myself. And in this story, what I will do is I'll bring out some of the prejudices that are experienced in our societies for girls, and then how they can be actually overcome. So I being a girl myself, so I grew up in an environment where I did not know that there was a difference between boys and girls, because I grew up amongst boys. We could share responsibilities equitably. So I thought everything was normal. I then went into school and I enjoyed my mathematics at an early age, and that was very normal. So came then the high school days, then I had to choose a profession to pursue. And in doing that, I was then challenged. I loved my physics very much, and I believed that I was supposed to do some physics as part of my career development. And as I chose the subjects that I wanted to do, I spoke to my father about the choices. Then already he said, you cannot be doing physics. And I asked him, why is that so? So he explained to me that no, the career path that you want to take is predominantly for boys, not for girls. So I cannot allow you to do that. Rather, I prefer that you do biology. And I was, no, I don't like biology. So why should I be pushed to do what I don't believe in? And he explained that these fields that you love are male dominated, but and you will not cope in those environments. So I rather advise you to look for more feminine environments where you can actually fare very well. So then I said no, but I still wanted it. For some reason, the school that I went to do my my A levels, they also preferred that girls do not do physics. So I found myself being forced to do biology instead of the physics that I love to do. And I questioned why it was supposed to be like that, but I couldn't get an answer. And immediately I started to experience what it is like to be discriminated in the field of sciences. The boys in our class would then tag us with names, the long johns, the short johns, and the neutral johns. So you already can feel that I do not belong to this environment. So as I was researching and preparing for this discussion, I looked at some of the main reasons why girls do not fare well or end up dropping out of these science fields. And I realized that it's because of the stereotypes. They are given labels and they feel that they don't belong to certain environments, or when boys come together, they make you feel the space does not belong to you. However, that does not define who women are. If you look at the statistics from primary school all the way to college, women and girls dominate the numbers. You always find that the skeletons are for more women, for more girls enrolling for these different programs. So where do they fall out? I looked at the statistics again, and I saw that, like in Africa, typically around high school, you start seeing girls dropping off from education in general, and also from sciences due to other factors which are societal. For instance, child marriage. The girl is now forced to get married because they are mature, so they drop out of school. And for some reason, also, we are self-aware at those teen ages. So we are told that this is not feminine enough, and we start making choices that we believe are feminine. Of course, maths is also given a stereotype that it is difficult for girls, so we already start running away from that. By the time we go to college, yes, the numbers still prove that there are more women going into college. However, the graduation rates from the report that I used from 2018, it shows that only about 8% of the graduates, all the female graduates, are actually in science-related fields. So most of the ladies end up in humanities or in business studies, or those careers that are looking like they are more feminine. So then I went on to check, why does that then happen like so? And the statistics also continue to show that it's because of the work environment where we feel that maybe we do not belong, or we are not good enough. So we leave that field. Then also comes the biological factors that influence us. We are created to procreate, and we bear the children, and as such we end up looking after the family. And as we start our careers, we might start at the same level as the men. However, as we pursue our other responsibilities, then we are left behind. So those are all factors that contribute. I would like to just confirm, can you see my my slides?
No.
They are not displaying.
You did not display your slides, Prof.
I shared from the second device.
Yes, but it didn't come through.
All right, let me share again.
Here now. Okay, there.
Okay, so now you can see them. All right. So I'll just using that example that I've given, then I'll look at the challenges, then I can present some strengths in the women and girls in science, and then I can also present on some solutions. Nothing novel, because all the solutions that are out there, we have seen them and we know how they go. So telling my story, how I ended up in the sciences and the challenges that I experienced, how did I then succeed in coming out of there? I had support from around me. So the first thing that happened is, in my first year in high school, I was challenged in mathematics, which was my favorite subject and best subject. And that was an alarm for my parents. So they chose to look for a tutor. And the tutor was a man, because they were the common ones during that time. And this man was different from the ones that were bullying me. So he presents to me some challenges. I solve them. Then he asked me, then what is your problem? And I told him, you know, I'm told I'm not good enough, and these are the challenges I'm facing. Then he told me, from this day on, you go back and you tell whoever challenges you that what John can do, I can do better than him. And what he cannot do, I can do it. And that was a mindset change for me. With that empowered mindset, I could face any challenge. And since then, I could not feel being discriminated in any environment that I went into, because I was supported and I was motivated from within. Of course, externally, there were factors that were fighting against me, but as long as I had that internal confidence that I could do it, then I knew I could do it. So bringing it to the problem that we have with gender inequality in the sciences, there are many reasons that have been presented, amongst them the biases within the society, some which are systematic, some technological, like the AI biases that Professor Gina was talking to. If you present some, let's say, for instance, you are searching for a doctor using some of these machine learning algorithms, they would automatically assume that it is a male figure because of how they've been trained. So depending on the training of the technology, it creates biases that can also hinder us in trying to find out what professions we can best look for. If you look for professions for women, you'll be directed to those which are typically believed to be meant for women. So amongst other things are mental barriers, the things that we are made to believe ourselves. If you are told that you belong to this corner as a woman, you believe that and you leave it. So it hinders you from pursuing those challenging professions that can actually make a difference. Maybe that is why we have fewer women. It could also be peer pressure. I take an example of women in computing. We always run these conferences where we are sharing experiences and we are trying to motivate girls. And when you talk to the girls, some of the things that they bring about are, if you are, let's say, a network technician or a hardware engineer, you'll be carrying these spanners around, screwdrivers, and you have to climb towers to pull cables. That doesn't look feminine enough, so it's not cool. So we try to bring the message that even in that, you can be still feminine and still achieve your dreams. So maybe this is why we lose some of these girls at a young age. As they define themselves, they start feeling that some things are not feminine enough. As they want to identify as a woman that they are, they shun away from being scientists, because apparently scientists put on a lab coat and they are always behind those labs and they do experiments. Furthermore, societal norms, cultures, and where we are supposed to stay also determine that. Sometimes it's not by choice. Parents cannot afford to send all their children to school, so due to that poverty, they make a preference as to who is a more important child in the family or who they perceive to be the better choice to provide for the family, and then the girl child is left out. The sciences generally are more expensive, so if a parent has to make a decision, they might be more inclined towards the cheaper options for their girl child. But these are assumptions, and based on the statistics that we have, that maybe those could be the other things. If you go into the rural underserved societies, you are encountered the situation where they do not have exposure to technologies or to these careers in the science field. The best role models they have are nurses, or they have their teachers. And if, unfortunately, the science teachers are not women, then they don't have someone to look up to. They cannot be steered towards that profession. So this already limits their choices. And when they choose their subject, then they look at their business teacher who is a lady like them, then this is the way to go. So those could be some of the things that are challenging these young girls. And that's why our numbers are not changing, regardless of the fact that we've been going on about this and we've been talking about how to empower girls and women, and we still have the statistics that are talking against it. So I just used a quote from the World Bank, which is showing how much we lose globally in terms of the economics due to less empowered women. This could be maybe because of the salaries that they are given in their workplaces, which are lower than their male counterparts. It could be there are many responsibilities that they have to deal with, which are hindering the development, but it all stems on the gender inequalities that we have. And talking of this, in the African cultures, we believe that when you educate a woman, you are educating the nation. Why? Because then they are empowered to empower the other generations. Maybe we need to change the way we look at the empowering of these girls and these women to ensure that we get an equitable share on the science field. So looking at some trends, I noticed that when women eventually go into sciences, there will be more in the biological sciences, which could also be related to the stereotypes that we have. More chemists, maybe the pharmacists, material scientists, because they're in the background, they don't shine so much. We also have computer scientists, which are a lower proportion, and then the mathematicians as well as the engineers. So the numbers, as you go in, they are very few, which means the more the challenge there is in the job, or it's perceived to be in the job, the women are getting lower and lower. Still looking at those trends, when we look at the graduation of these women, of us as women from the science-related fields, I used some statistics that I got from AAUW. This was in 2015. They showed that the women were growing slightly in the engineering fields, those were graduating, but there were many women graduating from the science related. Sorry, from the. Now I'm losing my track here. I'm not following the slides. Sorry. So from all sciences in general, there is a rise or an increase. But when you look at the engineering, you realize that it is at the bottom of the trend. And if you look at the computing, the computer scientists are actually going down. And you wonder, why is it that the computer science field is going down when we're actually having more technology integrated in our lives? So that could also be attributed to the thoughts that we have around these professions, thinking that they are supposed to be for the men. They're supposed to be the ones programming. They're the ones who are supposed to be building up technologies. So what are some of the solutions? I'm not sure if my slides are visible enough, but I proposed a couple of solutions based on, all right, but based on some of the practices that have been proposed by UNESCO. There is a document with a number of propositions that have been seen to bring some changes. Amongst them is awareness. So looking at awareness and career guidance or career fair, what I picked up could be a way of improving is to ensure that we reach them young while they're still in their primary school before they reach their puberty, sensitize them and continuously mentor them to continue in these science subjects so that we don't lose them when they become older. Among some of the initiatives that could be tied to that are the coding sessions for girls, camps like we have had YSI, Women in Science, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics camps, where we expose these girls to mentors who are already practicing in the field. And as they interact with them, they are inspired to also become like them. And what would then be necessary is for continuous mentorship so that they are continuously encouraged and they can believe in themselves and not fall out. We also need to look at inclusive curriculum. Sometimes when you talk to girls in the science field, they talk about the way the systems are coded or the way the gender is presented in the classroom. So what is it that we can have a curriculum that makes the girls feel like they are girls while they are doing their sciences, but without also infringing on the boys' environment? So balancing the way we present our curriculum to keep encouraging them to be part of that group. Then we also need to find ways of incentivizing or recognizing their talents. Where the talent is there, what is it that we can do? If scholarships are being offered or grants are being offered, let them be equitably shared between the girls and the boys so that they can also have an equal chance. The same applies to financial assistance. Where there's talent, let's recognize it and provide for it to continue. So at the center of it, we need societal reforms within the education structures or the home setups, where we can recognize that women and girls can also do well in their in the science sphere. So those are some of the things that I would like to propose that we continue with as we encourage these girls to go on. I just listed some of the things that we have done within Namibia, but these are not unique to Namibia. They've also been practiced elsewhere. Like the African Girls Can Code Camp was done in South Africa with girls from different countries organized by the AU. The same with the YSI. This is an initiative by the US state government, which includes girls from different continents who are allowed to have this experience. Then we have Women in Engineering, which is a society of women who actually reach out to youngsters and try to mentor them into these careers. Then we have Cyber Dudes, focusing on how to empower girls into cybersecurity. So there are many options that we can look at it, but the most important thing is to encourage the girls to stay in the science fields no matter what, by constantly speaking to them, encouraging them, exposing them to the different options that they have as scientists, and having these us right here, Dr. Ngopo, Professor Matthews, let's go out there and share our experiences with girls so that they can be inspired to be like us and they can keep in the game. Let's share our stories. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. Shava. I think we are running a few minutes late. If you can bear with me, we just need to go through one or two just for clarity on some of the topics that have been addressed. I think we've covered very well the equity issue. We've covered diversity. We've looked at equality. We've looked at empowerment of women and inclusion. Now the question is, and some of the areas that Prof. Shava just covered, it was on curriculum. What do we need basically to do? Yes, curriculum, we're saying curriculum must be either flattened or changed, or it must be accommodative to boys and girls. There must not be any difference. But I think with your guidance, without policy change or advocacy, the curriculum in different countries will take forever. What do we need to do? Any Prof. Matthews, Dr. Ngoko, or Prof. Shava?
I mean, I think that the kind of things that we were talking about of multiple paths for beginners that reach different kinds of people. I think Professor Njoko was talking about that, and Professor Shava was talking about all of the activities in Namibia that's going on. Those are great examples of going outside of the official curriculum, just doing it, right? Not waiting, and as Professor Njoko said, not waiting for permission, not waiting to be empowered by anyone else. It's not, I don't think any of those are easy answers, but I think those are some good answers.
Okay, thank you.
I think
after you talk, can say something, Doc?
If I may add to Professor Matthews' comment about creating a classroom environment that encourages inclusivity and diversity. With regards to the actual content, I'll use the text base where I operate. Coding is coding. But then the environment that we create in that classroom must actually be structured in such a way that the potential of the girl child is nurtured, as well as the potential of the boy child by the environment. Because remember, again, please, Professor Matthews, I don't know what the experience is like on your side. The minute young people walk into the classroom, we come from different backgrounds. Perhaps you were, sorry, a Professor Shava when you were young, and you're walking with this, male voice in your head saying, you can't, Now, how do we shift the dynamic to actually encourage inclusivity and, say it's good that we're different? Because a scary thought, perhaps going off topic a bit, that came to my mind, listening to Professor Matthews' presentation. Imagine an AI in the future that has only been developed by men. I have an AI robot in my house and all they can do is think like a man. That was scary for me. So we need more women in that space to make sure that my AI will be suitable for me, because, that's the extreme, just a silly example of an extreme case of what could happen if we don't encourage, equity in these spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. I think
I'd love to say one other thing if I could. I think too often we are encouraged to apologize for the pieces of ourselves that stick out of the mold that's expected. And I think the more we can tell each other and our students, children, insist on the pieces of yourself that stick outside of the mold, right?
Correct.
Make sure that the molds are being built for all of us, not just, when facial recognition systems don't work for all of us, or when NLP systems don't work for all languages, or all of these things, the problem is with the systems. The problem is not with us. And I think the more we refuse to apologize for those things and take our seat at the table and insist that the systems be designed to accommodate us, rather than apologizing for the ways in which we don't quite fit into the systems that were built, we're all going to be better off. Not just us, but everyone will be better off. And when we have a chance to insist on it at the table, when we have a seat at the table, we can take that approach.
Can I ask a question? Do you think there is enough mentorship and role models to change the narrative?
Well, there's never enough people to be role models and mentors, but if we each take our responsibility and mentor as many as possible, I think we can begin to see the change. Using Nelson Mandela's quote, if you want to see the change in the world, then be the change that you want to see. So it starts by us, with us making that difference that you want to see, and hopefully those we are impacting are also going to take it further. That can also be developed through mentorship of other mentors, like these girls that we mentor. Then they go back and they mentor within their societies and communities. They become the advocates of the change. And that way, one person can reach multitudes through their different networks, and it propagates to the other people who don't have direct access to us.
Thank you, Prof. Sorry, Doctor.
Sorry, I just wanted to add to Prof. Shava's comment. I think there are enough to get started, Mr. Mdwa. I think there are enough women and operating in these spaces to get started with the agenda of, creating an awareness and encouraging young women to be involved in these spaces. Linking it to a comment that Prof. Shava made earlier with the attitude of some of these young women who define certain things. The girls now are defining certain career options as something that's not feminine enough for them, And I think that I've been repeating this particular mantra, to different audiences over the past couple of months, which says, you cannot be that which you cannot see. If I took a picture of this conversation and cut out and cropped out Mr. Mdwaba and pasted it in Edwisi or in Soweto or in Danzane, just by looking at these beautiful faces of these ladies on this panel, one young girl is going to ask, what are they doing there? And then when somebody explains, that is how the seed will be planted in that young girl's mind, So I think we just need to be more conscious of the contribution we can make in that regard as females that are operating already in those spaces.
Thank you. I think for me, we've actually dealt with, and I'm going to summarize, we've dealt with support that is needed to enable educational and professional development opportunities for upcoming science female students and women professionals. I think it's an area that needs to continue being explored, discussed, and we really need to interrogate such environments to make sure that we level the playing fields into the future. It's not something that happens like PACTA has done during only women and science in women and girls in science once a year during February 11th. So it's something that we need to continue doing on an ongoing basis, so that it must be part of our socialization that we know that this needs to be done. We've looked at mentoring. I believe in mentoring. As mentoring, as Professor Shava has indicated, that it provides the key to strategic and intentional acquisition and retention of women. So, and the development and growth, basically, which is a crucial part for leading diversity and inclusion. I think, as it has been highlighted, that the more the women that are there, the more the women become thought leaders in this space, the more the young girls, as they grow up, want to mimic or to be seen to be like the leaders that are out there. Now the question is, and just so that we don't run very late, how do we bridge the inequality gap? Specifically, and I'll tell you specifically, in rural and peri-rural areas, that gap, us sitting here or in township environments or what happens to the women that, one, there's no access to information, without having information, without having even people that can guide and not push the stereotypes and biasness of the past. What do we need to do to close that gap?
I wish we had a magic answer. I think it's just hard work. It's one-on-one, and it is every day, and it is yeah. I don't think that there is a fast answer. But as the other panelists have said, right, we have enough to start. Maybe we're better off today. Are we better off today than we were yesterday? Are we better off today than we were 10 years ago? If that's the case, you start to see that it might be slow, but it matters. And I especially in my work think a lot about automated systems coming in and reinforcing old stereotypes. Like I don't want some of the good progress we're making to be traded away for efficiency gains that serve a very narrow band of decision makers. I would like us to insist on technologies that contribute to healthy humans and healthy societies for all of us more widely.
Thank you, Prof. Matthews. Dr. Ngoko, do you want to add something, or Prof. Shava?
If I may go quickly,
yes.
Mr. Mdwa.
Thank you.
Agreed with Professor Matthews. It's not a quick answer, and it will take time to get it right. But I do think that if we become more intentional about our objectives, then in the long run, we will have a different result. I think part of that intention, that intent needs to be exhibited by the decision-making bodies that actually need to be representative of the target population. So that will actually help us bridge the disconnect between policy and implementation, because right now it all looks good on paper, it sounds good, but it's just failing to connect to the masses, so to speak. I think to try and reduce that failed connection or limit that, we also need to engage with these women and these girls. So we need to find a way of creating a dialogue or connecting so that we can find out from their experiences, because their contexts are different. What do they think could actually help in their particular in their particular situations? It's not a one-size-fits-all answer, and we need to move beyond policy to implement. And once we implement, certainly if we had monitoring and evaluation systems in place between 2011 and 2021, somebody should have picked up that, hang on, this indicator is not moving at all. What do we need to adjust to try and correct it in the next 5 years? So we don't want to wait another 20 years to only discover that we've moved by 2% from the 24 we were in 2021.
Thank you. I think for me, it's very important, and this is what you are highlighting, that we have to be deliberate and intentional about about the targeted approach we are taking to ensure active participation of this group, this big group, this big important gender group, which is part of this society, that everyone is not left behind. It's inclusive, the development. And I asked this question, and Professor Matthews might not have a view of this. you know, it's very difficult as Lalini, you know, Professor Matthews, as Lalini is in the rural areas. You know, there's dynamics. There's dynamics in the urban areas. There's dynamics in the townships, but in the as Lalini, it's worse. You know, so we need to access the rural areas so that they are pulled and they're part of the ecosystem that is developmental, that takes them to an equal, hopefully, or almost equal ecosystem, and they actively participate. So for me, we've really delved into these things and we've discussed, and I think we've covered a lot. It is eye-opening that us as men, me sitting here, I believe in development of women and girls. For me, it's very close to me as a person, as a father. I've got my daughter that I've raised to be very independent. She is actually one of Pike's, she's one of the founders of Pike. And if all girls would be in that position, and even if they are 95% of who she is or 120% of she is, then we've got a better society. And Professor Matthews showed the language issue. You know, a week ago, I had a meeting, Prof. I was surprised that in Tanzania, there's a group called Tech Chicks Girls that have taken the language, the IT language or ICT or science language from English, and they've written it in Swahili. So they're doing everything in Swahili, even programming, they're doing it now in Swahili. I think also that it makes it easier. It familiarizes some of the concepts that are difficult to understand, I suppose. And if that can reach parents that still feels that there's a demarcation or difference between boys and girls, and if it's done in Swahili or any other language in Africa and all other areas, I think they will also be comfortable to say, maybe we're all equal and we're all the same. From my side, I think Prof. Matthews and Dr. Ngoko, Prof. Shava, you can wrap up so that we finish. Thank you very much. I highly appreciate. For me, I've learned a lot from the discussion. For people who are listening and people who are going to listen post this discussion, I hope this recording or the discussion and the input you've given, it will make a difference, and they'll look at things differently as going to the future.
Well, I'll just say thank you very much for having me here. I hope we will have opportunities to work together more, follow up more. I mentioned the AI for Girls workshop that's coming up. I would love to see all three of you be a part of that, and other people who are listening. And you know, like the NLP work that we're doing with multiple languages, I would love to follow up with, you know, I just welcome opportunities to connect with the three of you and anyone who's listening. I guess that's how we do this hard work, is one-on-one and connecting with one another and empowering one another and ourselves. Thanks so much for letting me be a part of this. This was wonderful.
Thanks, Prof. Matthews.
I would like to say thank you to PICTA for this opportunity to make a difference or a contribution to changing the life of the girl child. I hope it will make a difference in one person, if not two. And I'm thankful for the network that we have just created. I have an interest in the AI biases that are introduced into the way we live, and I would be definitely one of your participants in your workshops, and I would like to contribute towards that. And Prof. Ngoko, I hope I'll be visiting you soon. I'm a proud alumni of NMMU, and I have some work unfinished. So let's keep on making the difference that we have to make. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Ngoqo?
Thank you, Mr. Mjawa. Let me be brief. Thank you for the opportunity. It was fantastic meeting these women on this panel, because from here we grow. I want to perhaps extend an invitation to anybody else who comes across this recording to reach out. Remember, we don't have to wait for the authority to make our presence known and to claim our spaces in the ICT or science spaces. So if you come across this recording and you have no idea what we've been talking about, but you're very interested in finding out more, or you've worked on a project in your township, in your rural areas, in your wherever you are, and it didn't work out, and you want to pick our brains for this or that particular aspect of it, please just connect with PICTA, and those requests for information or additional, assistance, I'm sure, will be channeled through in the proper way. But please, young women, the authority isn't coming. You are the authority. Claim your space.
Thank you, Doctor. In wrapping up, two minutes, PICTA is got a division within PICTA that is Women in Digital Era. It's, in short, it's wide. So we've got that to focus on women and the girl child. We've got a webinar coming for celebrating the International Women's Day on the 8th of March. We do focus on the development of women. We've got a channel on that we discuss on radio, which it looks at women in ICT. That happens every week or every second week. We've got different platforms that we've set up, and hopefully into the future, we are going to have numerous other platforms to address the challenges that women have. From my side, I thank you very much. You've made us look good. From PICTA perspective, I thank you very much for accepting the invitation that we forwarded. Prof. Matthews is here for the second time. Thank you very much, Prof. And from Dr. and Prof. Shava, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We will call again. We will engage you. There is a lot that we can do from engaging with you, and the lessons that we're going to learn as we go to, so that we're ready and we've got the capacity and the capability of making a difference to women and girls. From my side, I thank you very much. Have a good weekend, blessed evening. Have a good day, Prof. I know from your side it's still very early. Enjoy the rest of the Friday. From my side, I thank you. I thank you a lot. God bless. Till we meet again.
Our mission is to develop, engage, and empower current and future generations of women leaders.
My son one day, so mommy, what do you do at work? So I tried to explain software engineering, and that's when the spark came, and I said, okay, what if I venture into entrepreneurship, where I build an academy in which I teach children how to write software and to make sure that the future generations are basically catered to.
I think when it comes to enabling conducive environment for the inclusion of women, technology is a powerful tool, but it's just one tool. And no one, women or anyone else, should forget their whole selves when they come to the table.